Please welcome Kwindla, Anoop, Paige, Alberto, and Dan to the stage.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you these team speakers. I'm very excited to dive into the foundations of voice AI with you all today. We are scheduled for 50 minutes. We're going to start from the very beginning, going into the orchestration, then going into the real world constraints and like what are some of the pain points of building and deploying these AI systems in production. Starting from the very beginning, we will go for a quick round of introductions. My name is Dan Goosewin. I'm a developer relations and partnerships lead at Vapi. And I have here Kwindla, Anoop, Alberto, Paige. If you guys want to introduce yourself one by one, starting with you.
Sure. Greetings, wow, that was very loud. Hi, greetings, everyone. My name is Paige. I lead developer experience for Google DeepMind, which means that I get to work on all of our great APIs for models, as well as tools that you might have used like AI Studio, the AI agent features in Google Colab, and the like. So very excited to be here and to see what y'all are building with voice AI systems.
Beautiful. Alberto?
Thank you. Hey, folks. Good day. My name is Alberto Montilla. I'm a Senior Director of Products at Twilio. And I am responsible. I lead the voice application services, which is basically anything that runs on top of a phone call, voice AI included. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anoop Dawar. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Deepgram. What does that mean? It means I build strategy where the rubber meets the road, not where the rubber meets the sky. Because startups have to be very focused on the here and now while also planning for the long term. And I'm really glad to be here at the panel.
It is a really good title. I'm envious of that Chief Strategy Officer title. It sounds great.
I prefer Chief Janitor, but either way works.
That's what I am. I'm Kwindla. I'm the CEO or Chief Janitor at a company called Daily. We make networking infrastructure, software developer tools. We power Vapi. And since the launch of GPT-4, I personally have been really excited about what I used to call talk to an LLM use cases. Now we call them voice agents. And I have the privilege of working with all the people on this panel because we are so low down in the network stack that if you need to move audio and video around, we can help you.
Beautiful. Thank you for introductions once again. Thank you for joining. It is really, really exciting. I get to work, same as you do, Quinn, with all of you on different parts of the stack. We handle the entire orchestration, everything you need to do to build a conversational AI experience. We try to abstract away all the complexity so that the developers focus on actual business logic, not the integrations, not the adaptation for external connections, etc. But starting from the very beginning, I'm going to take a deeper dive into what it means to actually orchestrate to build a conversational AI experience. What is orchestration? There are a bunch of building blocks. Well, actually, first of all, before we get into that, I'm got to get a feel for the room. How many of you folks are developers here? If you can raise your hands. Excellent. All right, lovely. All right, that's awesome. Then, we're going to go into the orchestration. The three primary components, the way I see it in conversational AI, voice AI experience, is text-to-speech, LLM, and speech-to-text models, right? But this is not everything. There are a lot more components and a lot more pain points that need to be addressed in order to facilitate a great user experience. Whether or not it would be VAD, utterance detection, telephony, and curious, in your opinion, and we'll go around and share our perspective for a few minutes, what's the most underestimated building block out of the entire pipeline? What are your thoughts on this, Paige?
Excellent. So I'm happy to start. One thing that I really appreciate, as well as how much these systems have kind of evolved over the span of the last year. I'm not sure how many folks in the room might have heard of something called Project Astra. Or seen it. It was a kind of a prototype first announced at I/O 2024, which allows you to have a voice conversation with the Gemini model. So you speak to it, there's a reasoning step in the middle, and then you get a response back. We've now made that available for folks to use as the Gemini Live API. So it works in hundreds of different languages. You can kind of use it in combination with many of the products that the Daily team has created to kind of power the real-time voice-to-voice experiences for all of your apps. But something even cooler is that just a few months ago, we've been able to get an experience that's roughly the same, but just running completely on a mobile device. So instead of having to, ping a server and get a response back, you could have the voice conversation with the speech-to-text LLM-enabled component in text-to-speech completely on your mobile device, powered by Gemma, but also some of the smaller models that you might have experience with using that are all open models. So I think that that's one of the things that I'm really excited to see future work on, is that right now we're relying so much on server-side pings, and I think that in the future, those will still be important, but we'll be able to more elegantly toggle between these more local experiences versus things that need a little bit more horsepower, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really do share your passion for on-device, on-the-edge intelligence, because no matter how you look at it, it's where we're moving. It's going to happen, and advancements in these smaller models, such as Gemma, it's very, very exciting to observe. But curious, in your opinion, Alberto, what is the most underestimated building block of conversational AI?
I think I'm going to go with a network item, and that has to do with end-to-end observability. When we say observability, we talk about what the agent is doing, what the model is producing as output, but there is much more than that. I mean, imagine that the end user, the customer, is on a mobile phone with a bad reception versus somebody that is on their desk connected via a bad Wi-Fi, or someone that has excellent quality and have HD audio. The experience with the same LLM, with the same personality tuning, et cetera, the experience is completely different. Some of them might complain to you as provider. How do you know what is going on? Observability is critical to what? To provide a great customer experience, and B, to scale, because you're going to have, the moment you have thousands, millions of customers calling you every day, you're going to have customers across the spectrum, all type of devices, all type of connections. So I think that's, and that requires technology investment and operational and process investment as well, and that's sometimes overlooked.
Oh yes, very often overlooked. People are like, okay, give me the black box, just do the magic. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Anoop?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think all of us here think we've solved some important problems, and I think we have. That's why we're here. But to me, the biggest underestimated piece is the art of conversation, because that's the thing that none of us have done yet. And so it's all on you. We have kind of left that incredibly complex piece of the equation on all of you builders. And what do I mean by that? Like, starting from the simplest thing of how do you identify the primary speaker, when do you switch, how do you actually have a conversation, when you have to do something long and reasoning related task, how do you keep the customer engaged? If you call a call center today and you do a simple thing, like today I had to call for my wife to get an international plan because she's flying out to India. And so, okay, easiest thing is to call. So I'm calling them, and first thing you get is, thank you for calling, pick your provider. And then it gets to like, we are going to record your call for privacy, and I have called you 20 times. I know that. Why are you wasting 14 seconds of my life to tell me that? And then you go through the whole conversation, and it took me 8 minutes. In a modern voice, it should take me less than 30 seconds. But how do you orchestrate it? How do you make it natural? We've kind of completely left it to all of you, and I think that's the most underestimated problem.
Yeah, and Vapi in particular actually shares your vision for this. We've announced our mission earlier today in Jordan's talk about building a human interface for companies, right? So very much resonates with us. What do you think, Kwindla?
I think it's useful to talk about sort of the trajectory, because we live in this moment where everything is changing really, really, really fast. And I talk a lot about 2024 problems, where we were trying to get all the basic building blocks to like the 80-20 level, so we could actually deploy these things to production and see them scale. I think we got there last year. Now we have a sort of new set of pain points because we're trying to do more things because we have better building blocks. One of those is turn detection. So how do you know when the person is done talking and the LLM should respond? I always said that at Daily we would never get distracted by training models because we work with all the great companies that training models. And then of course you should never say never because we got really tired of not being able to solve the turn detection problem. So we trained an open source, open weights, open data sets turn detection model last year. We're now on V3 of that model. Lots of people are contributing data and ideas to it. It was an exciting part of the open source ecosystem. But now there are also other equally good, I think, models that have come out in the last couple of months, including really good turn detection in the model you announced today, and really interesting approaches like the Gemini models doing selective refusal angles on turn detection, which I think is complementary to having like a small specialized model do it. So the ecosystem is moving so fast. I think we're all trying to break off these pieces. I see the underserved stuff that is kind of the ferment now that's bubbling as first, how do you use multiple models together effectively in one conversation? That actually turns out to be a lot of different things depending on what you're trying to do. But I'm super excited about like multiple kinds of inference, maybe multiple different models, some of them fine-tuned, maybe some of the models running on device and some of the inference running in the cloud. I think there's just so much work to do there. And then the other thing, and this is again inspired by your release today, I am increasingly getting pulled into conversations that are about multiple people in a voice conversation. And so you can address that from like the speaker diarization angle. There's some other ways you can think about it. But the next big step function in some parts of that human-like conversation are breaking out of the one person, one LLM mode and taking these models out into the real world and having them understand all the noises that we all hear and what do those things mean, and being better at processing crosstalk and not having to work quite so hard in our system instruction to say, hey LLM, there's 3 people in this conversation, you need to do X for person Y and A for, you know, it's just so much of a prompt engineering challenge, but it really should get pushed down into the model and the orchestration layer. So I'm excited about that too.
Right, that's a lot of pain points you actually mentioned. But since you started talking about pain points, I'm curious. If you are working on a real-time experience, right, on a conversation, you're speaking to it, right? If it takes forever to respond, if it takes more than a second, more than 2 seconds to respond, it doesn't matter how intelligent it is, it's just not usable, right? Humans don't have the patience to wait.
Latency matters.
Latency matters. And there's a compromise, usually, at least from what I'm seeing, between latency and quality. And like striking the balance, some people might find it complicated. So I'm curious, what have been your observations on balancing that? And what is your general rule of thumb of figuring out when somebody's over-optimizing for one over the other?
I mean, I'm the guy who yells about latency all the time on social media.
Yeah.
So I obviously care about latency, but I will say that there's been a transition again as we've started to mature in the ecosystem. Early on, all the demos we built, all the POCs we helped customers build really focused on latency, almost to the exclusion of everything else. Partly because we knew it mattered, partly because people have this very strong walk-up sensitivity to latency. One of the first things you perceive, as you were saying, in that voice interaction experience is the voice-to-voice latency, actually measured from the time I know I stopped speaking to the time I hear the first audio hit my ears. Now, though, I tell people, get it working, because we can solve the latency problem. We have best practices around latency, and we can show people demos that are more than fast enough for them to feel natural. And we've almost flipped it a little bit and said, you're trying to do some complicated thing with voice AI. Let's get the model choice right. Let's get the orchestration pieces tuned well. Let's plug it into your enterprise backend system and check those boxes for you. I know we can solve the latency problem for you, but let's get it working.
Right. Really curious to hear your thoughts on this, Anoop, because I know Deepgram works across the pipeline, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and you guys have excellent time-to-first byte metrics on your models. So what are your thoughts?
I paused for 2 seconds. Did you guys notice? Well, so I think latency is important, absolutely, in a conversational context, but I think perceived latency is significantly more important. And to Quinn's point, I think at this point, we feel like even in cascaded systems, the latency problem is solved or solvable if you know how to orchestrate these pieces together. But the perceived latency problem is still current and present. And that requires, again, the conversational pieces that we all as vendors can do significantly better and do better for you, so you don't have to orchestrate it. There's also a sense of taste and aesthetic. There's also like different conversations flow differently, so there's no one single like template that you can say, okay, it's a customer support template and boom, I'm done. In distribution context is significantly underrepresented in what we all provide you. And as you go through all your business use cases, you have that context. And right now, I think that will continue to be the challenge with perceived latency versus actual latency.
Yeah. Great. I'm curious to dive a bit deeper on the other end of like latency and delivering latency at scale. Scaling and working with infrastructure. Infrastructure companies, they talk about 5 nines reliability, right? But there are a lot of other factors that play into delivering an excellent experience to a user. We're dealing with jitter, packet loss, all these things in the field that people usually undermine, don't think about. Really curious, Alberto, in your perspective in particular, since you guys are building excellent APIs targeting developers, what has been your sort of point of view on what's the hardest that people really don't pay attention to?
It's a great question, and it has been exacerbated by generative AI. I think when generative AI has made, and some of the other technologies around voice AI have made extremely easy to put a demo, to put a POC. However, scaling that to your entire customer base is still pretty much as challenging as it has always been, from the days of predictive AI. And I think that's probably still the hardest part, which is first, from a technology perspective, getting from the 95% or the 80% to the 95%, the 100% is extremely hard. And there is an understanding of what technology choices you make, not only to put the POC, and also to scale that POC into all your customer base. Examples, things as simple as language coverage. We all put the POC in English. Do you have customers who speak Spanish and 10 or 20 other languages? What are you going to do about that? Is your model as good in Portuguese as it is in English? Probably not. The second part has to do with network connections. You put a POC, you use an SDK, and probably you go fine using your desktop or your mobile phone. But then do you require customers to connect through the PSTN, mobile phones, landlines, et cetera, et cetera? Is your case inbound or outbound? Those technology, and then the last part of it is you were talking about 5 nines. What models offer you 5 nines on their own today? So you need to start thinking about, okay, how do I do failover so that I have continuity of my services? What are the what is this degraded service? What does these degraded services look like? Because those are the kind of things that your customers are going to complain about. Those are the kind of things that are going to break your service level agreement. And you need to look at that. So that's the technology part. Then the second part is the operations procedures. Do you have a plan on how you're going to scale up your voice AI application? From the POC to the moment you onboard the first beta cohort, to the moment you say, I'm going to go GA with the first cohort, to the moment you are 100% deployed. You need to be able that you're able to gather the data, gather the feedback, have an improvement loop to the point that where you achieve or get very close to your objective. So that's a framework. That's an adoption framework, which, by the way, is not very different from the adoption frameworks on bots or any of the other technologies that have existed in the past. So I think that those are things that we need to have into considerations from the day after you put your, or the day you decide you want to build your POC with the intention of building a product or a service out of it.
Right, right. Makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Quinn, since you operate in the protocol level, it's your bread and butter, you probably have a few things to say.
There's a lot of education of developers who are new to the space. And part of what I think you guys do really well at Vapi is provide these curated best practices bundles that help people succeed. One of the conversations I have over and over is which kind of networking you should use in which circumstances. Use WebRTC for edge to cloud, use WebSockets, server to server, and understand the telephony infrastructure that you're going to use, because most of us are building telephony use cases so far in the evolution of voice AI, and understand how PSTN and SIP work at a good enough level that you can debug and have good intuitions about your systems, and understand which providers are going to give you the right level of nines. I can tell you, because we have lots of qualitative and quantitative experience, that Twilio is head and shoulders above their competitors in terms of both reliability and the sort of surface area of bugs that all complex systems have. And it's worth using the providers that give you that level of service. We're also new at this, and one of the cognitive dissonance pieces I have is, as I think you were just saying, none of the model providers are anywhere close to the reliability all of us were trained to have to deliver to our customers in the infrastructure world. And that's a problem. And none of us have quite figured out how to deal with that building on top of the model providers. But nobody has enough GPUs, and running GPU cluster supercomputers is like a new thing. And everybody's growing. So one thing you have to figure out when you're building this stuff at the application level is, and you all do this for your customers at Vapi, is how do you fail over gracefully from a model provider to some alternative, depending on what that is. It might be another region, it might be another model, but it's use case dependent, but it's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to serving developers, we sort of operate in this developer tooling, developer-facing space, all of us here. And really curious on your thoughts. There's a spectrum, right? Some would say, treat API as a black box. Magic happens. I don't care what happens there. Just trust the provider. Others will say, you need to deeply understand the technology under the hood. Otherwise, you're not going to be, using it effectively. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Let's start with you, Paige.
I definitely feel like we need to have people be able to understand each component piece of the system so they can help debug and triage when all of the component parts inevitably will go wrong. And that's some component of observability, like you were mentioning, as well as deeply understanding all of the kind of changes that exist whenever you go from having a more local experience to a server-side experience. I also think that helps you kind of design much more bespoke and very customer-centric experiences. I loved what y'all were just saying about the perceived latency of a conversation. I know that if somebody calls a call center and they're emotionally charged, they probably want somebody to help diffuse that situation, while also behind the scenes start of prefetching any of the data that's required in order to help answer their questions. I think we've, voice is a new interface, just like a browser is an interface for interacting with websites. And I think that there are still many of these hard-learned lessons that have been incorporated into things like browsers, like prefetching, like being able to detect, a person's likely to click this next button, that voice systems will need to be able to design as well. Even if it's as simple as this person's calling, they're emotionally charged, probably about money. I should be pulling up their account. I should be pulling up all of the documentation related to what they're worried about. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but it is very much I think we're at this kind of really exciting time where we're defining the new interface, just like browsers were defining the way that people interact with the internet.
Yeah.
And voice and visual content is going to be that interface.
Right. So generally speaking, you have to understand the pieces of it.
Yes, you have to understand the pieces. Unfortunately, black boxes just won't be sufficient, at least
Right.
not for now.
Yeah. We're not magicians here. We're engineers, right? So makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Alberto?
Just to double click a little bit on that, there are, I think there are a couple of things, right, to consider. The first one is every company that aims to be successful in this century have to be a digital company. That means, you need to be deep down into developing your specific experiences for your customers, because nobody else knows your customer as you do. Having said that, we know that modern technologies are built on, stacks that goes over, on top of each other. Do you have to build all of them? Oh no, you have to be those that are. You need to understand them, and you build those that are critical to delivering the experience. There is also a little bit of rule of economics. Need to understand how much it takes to develop a specific technology, maintain a specific technology, and whether you're going to get any return or enough return from it, and whether you can do a good job on it. So maybe, when I look at things like, for example, speech recognition, unless you are building a speech recognition engine yourself, and that's your business, your core business, you should go and, use an existing technology provider for speech recognition. Let's say, Deepgram, let's say Google. Because, are you going to do a better job than them? And are you going to get the ROI from there? So understand the technology, and then build what is critical for delivering your unique experience.
Thank you for saying nice things about Google.
We appreciate it. Yeah, no, but that all tracks. We're all building for developers here, so developer empathy, important, very important. Curious in your thoughts, Anoop.
I didn't think this was going to be the controversial question, so I'm gonna say something and then let's see what goes. So I agree, you should understand it, but I'm one of those people who spent a decade plus in engineering, hacking Linux kernels, building switches and routers, wireless access points, large-scale distributed file systems, analytics, data science. Okay, so what I've learned is, if you're curious and you want to really understand everything, the level there is the depth goes all the way down to the chips, right? So yes, but at what, so the rule of thumb I've built for myself to keep myself sane is, if I'm using something, I need to go 3 levels down to understand, okay, if I'm using speech to text, well, what is the problem I'm solving? How am I going to measure speech to text? One level. Okay, if I measure it this way, what are the things that go wrong? Second level. And then if these things go wrong, how am I going to engage with the vendor or myself to know that, am I capable of fixing it or do I need help? So I would say you have to figure out in your curiosity system how deep you need to go and which 3, 7, 5, whatever that thing is, because otherwise my brain explodes if I try to understand everything Deepgram does. And it's a small company of 135 people. But I can't just get into the depth of everything, but I need to get my job done. And I think most developers are in the same place. So I'm saying yes, but not quite yes.
Right.
I think it's a challenge too, in the sense that if you are getting into the business of kind of training your own models or fine-tuning your own models, the component complexity gets very large very quickly. As an example, if you did want to use models on device, then suddenly it matters what kind of hardware are people running on their mobile device. What is their latest generation of cell phone? Has the model drifted? Do you need to upgrade to the latest version? Do you need to fine tune? As soon as you fine tune, do you need to refine tune it because there's a new version that's out? All of these things are really, really high maintenance costs that I think that we're experiencing in a really painful way today, because everything, to Quinn's point, is so new. But that I hope over time we'll get to be a little bit more manageable, maybe by some of the companies that y'all are in the room already building.
I mean, I think these things are all complementary that all of you have said, and I think it's incredibly important. I spend a lot of time helping people in shared Slack channels and Discord and Twitter DMs and LinkedIn DMs and email. And I have done this for a long time, like you have been in developer tools for a long time. And I now have a heuristic about whether I'm going to be able to help a team or not. And part of that heuristic is, are you trying to do something where I've told you what will work and you are just continuing to tweak the parameters and change the pieces around and asking me why it's not working? And I'm super sympathetic, right? Because I'm an engineer and I want to get things the way I want them to, but it's a judgment thing.
Yeah.
And there's like the build the stuff that has business value or you're probably gonna have to go get another job. There's the really valuable heuristic of minimize complexity surface area or you are just not gonna be able to keep writing this piece of software sustainably. And then there's the engineering taste, which I think going down a certain number of levels is like a taste criterion. And it's do stuff that's gonna work. Like if you're experimenting with stuff on the weekend because you want to see where the boundary conditions are, that is awesome.
Yeah.
And that's useful and educational, but it's not going to actually help you build the product that you can sell because you probably can find a set of building blocks that demonstrably work and then stop futzing with those knobs. And I just think that's a really important thing. And I often see people sort of get stuck on that in something new, in a domain like we're all doing where nothing's perfect, everything's new. There's a lot to figure out.
Yeah, very important observation. And I really love that you brought up engineering taste too in there. It's something people don't really pay attention to, but I've found that it is actually quite important, the taste part of the equation for building software that serves people. Anyway, next question is for you, Quinn, and it is touching once again upon latency and definition of real time. Like, what the hell is a real time? Like, there's always going to be some latency, some delay, and I'm curious, like, usually people mean sub-second latency, or in the ballpark. What should real time mean in your opinion?
I think the answer from psychology, there's lots of psychology research. I think the answer from psychology research about where you want to land with perceived latency in a voice conversation is sub 500 milliseconds. There's so much psychology research, we could have a whole panel about that, and we could talk about the subtleties, but I think that is the answer. The practical answer, though, for building these systems is more complicated. And we talked a little bit before about how we really tried to demonstrate that we could get to low latency as the primary thing we were demonstrating early in this arc, and now it's a little more complicated than that. What I tell people today is we have a lot of data from deployments now. If you're under 1500 millisecond voice-to-voice latency, you are probably fine for your enterprise use case. And you need to make sure your complex voice AI workflows are as reliable as possible before you do too much more if you've gotten under 1500 milliseconds. But I do think as an ecosystem and as an industry, I think we are pushing down towards that 500 millisecond number, and that's what we should be aiming for.
Right, so that golden threshold, right, 500. What happens when we optimize below that? Does that matter?
How much do you want to talk about the psychology research? Because like one super interesting tidbit I'll just throw out is that there are some studies of how fast actual voice responses happen in real human conversations across cultures. Yeah. And there are some, so like American English, like 400 milliseconds. A lot of stuff clusters around 400 milliseconds. There's some that are a little slower, some that are a little faster. There's some outliers that are negative. There are cultures where it is so common that you start talking before your interlocutor is done talking, that if you just do it numerically, it's like negative 17 milliseconds.
Wow.
So there's a lot of human variety, and I think to the point of we're trying to build human-like conversations, we should respect that. But I think the practical answer is almost everybody doesn't really notice once you're down below 500 milliseconds true voice-to-voice.
Right.
There is plenty of data available. You know, contact centers have been around for many years. You know, focusing on business to consumer interactions, and there is plenty of data that illustrates not only latency but what is the flow of a conversation. Because when for example you call support, let's use a support use case. When you call support, you're typically reaching level 1 support. And they only know the basics, and they have to type, which means, latency in the response. There are studies also that says what are the most rewarding conversations, and they don't necessarily are the ones that are always, good. Mm-hmm. There is, we reward a little bit of ups and downs during the conversation. So I think the technical answer, it's 500 milliseconds, but that's only for the cases where we expect somebody to reply. When you say, good morning, you expect somebody to tell you good morning right away. But when you say, hey, I want to know when I'm due to refresh my iPhone, probably, it might take a few seconds. Yeah. So that's the kind of things that you have to build and test in your specific flows.
Yeah. And these are all conversations about, not pun not intended, but I guess it works, but conversations about synchronous conversations that are user invoked, right? I think we're also getting to this place where you might have an agent that wants to initiate a more proactive conversation with a person saying like, hey, did you know that there's a concert happening this week that might be really interesting for you? Do you want me to kind of comb Craigslist to see if I can find any discounted tickets or something similar? Or like, hey, your friend really enjoys this rock climbing pace. Do you want me to schedule a weekend adventure for the two of you to go and explore? I think we're also seeing for agents that are working on code bases, people feeling a lot friendlier towards these asynchronous scenarios where you can kind of ask for a change to be made across the code base or something similar. Like if I want a conversational agent to plan out weeks full of meals and then go and order everything on Instacart, I'm okay with not getting a response back immediately because I wouldn't necessarily need one. So I think we're also as engineers trying to understand what things need to be synchronous and kind of user-invoked conversations versus what should be more proactive, initiated by an agent or asynchronous conversation.
So much UI design to do.
Yeah.
So much UI design.
Yeah.
And there are totally places where push-to-talk is the right interface.
Yeah. Right.
I think they're limited, but I definitely think they exist.
Yeah.
I think one other important thing to say about latency is most people don't measure it correctly.
Yeah.
And that is worth understanding if you're in this room. And basically all the latency numbers you ever see quoted in benchmarks are wrong for voice AI. If you're measuring latency for your agent, and you absolutely should measure it manually, mechanically, so you really have a sense of it, record the call, put the audio file in an audio editor on your computer, draw a line in the gap between the waveform of the user stopping talking and the bot starting talking. That's the ground truth. You can't fake that. You can't get that wrong. Yep. You should be doing that manually, regularly with your voice agents.
And we have found that to be the way at Vapi too, so that tracks.
100%.
That tracks. Anyway, I'm going to keep things moving along. We talked a bit about latency again. Now, I like to imagine a vector space when I think of all the things that can go wrong with the conversational AI experience, right? There's accuracy, there's reproducibility, consistency, speed, many, many angles. And Anoop, this question is for you. I'm really curious. We talked a bit about measuring, about benchmarking, about achieving consistent outcomes. If you were to design, let's say, a benchmark of the next generation that would get things right, how would you design it? What would you measure? What would you focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before I answer that question, I'll say this, right? Most of the benchmarks that we use, all of us that are public, are sort of general purpose benchmarks. And what ends up happening is if your use case, especially if it's a business use case, it's highly likely that it's out of distribution of that benchmark. So you will go to the benchmark and say, oh, look, word error rate low, yay, let's go. And then you use it in your system and it doesn't work, right? And so first of all, understand that's the truth. And then the second thing of the thing is, okay, so should we all publish our benchmarks so that you all can get it? Well, we could. Let's say we have an in-distribution benchmark for, let's say, automotive vehicles, okay, and we publish it. Now, as soon as we publish it, everybody has it, right, including us. Now it's part of our training sets. Now there is no held out of eval system that's hidden, so it's gamed. And again, it's going to be out of distribution because no benchmark is ever representative of the whole distribution that you have. So hopefully that helps you know benchmarks are helpful, but they're not helpful. So just remember your domain in distribution is sort of the holy grail for making it work for yourselves. So trust the benchmarks, but don't trust the benchmarks.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, having said that, how do we think about this? At Deepgram, we think about it as we think that there is a general purpose benchmark, but things like word error rate are probably not the right measurements in today's voice agent real-time world. What do I mean by that? Okay, there are certain things if I get wrong, and even I'm not a non-native English speaker, I mess up my grammar, but you understand me. But if I pronounce the wrong word, it can make a huge difference, right? I don't want the subscription versus I want the subscription. If I drop the don't, it is a big difference in how whether you're going to be happy with me or not. So there are things that are, you could consider them as major errors, and there are things that are minor errors. What are the major errors for your system? How do you measure them, right? So that's one thing of how Deepgram thinks about it. And the second thing is then, okay, in domain, how do we create in domain data sets? So usually what we do is we end up working with, and we've been fortunate enough to be in voice before voice took off, which means we worked with a lot of contact center and other customers, and we jointly built in domain meticulously labeled data sets, and we've sort of carved them out, and we're very religious about not contaminating them into our training systems, and we continue to update them. So we have per industry or per domain benchmarks, and then we'll work with you as a customer to say, okay, you want to work with us and create a representative benchmark for yourself, let's do it. You want us to train a model only for you that nobody else in the world gets, let's do it. You want us to host it, you want you to yourself to host it, let's do it. And why do I say that? Because voice is not quite there yet where you can have one benchmark to rule the world, because what you're measuring differs. And I'll give you one more example before I stop my monologue. If you're in a classroom and the professor is speaking, well, that's the primary voice you want to transcribe. And if there are two kids out there laughing and making a joke, that's not that important. It's far field. I don't want to hear that. Okay, imagine you're in an E911 call where a mother is calling and you hear a child saying something really which shows that the child is now unsafe. Way back in the background, that's also far field audio, but all of a sudden that's the most important thing you want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? So how can you have one benchmark for where your domain is different? And so voice is therefore different than text-based systems and large language models. And it's one of the underappreciated aspects of it.
Yeah.
And I would say that even for the text and the code-based systems, like one benchmark cannot at all rule the world for those either. Like
Absolutely.
if you really, really deeply care about your user experience, you're going to need to be constantly creating evals.
Yeah, and all very excellent points. Like, engineers love measuring things, and it is very, very common to measure and optimize for the wrong thing. You have to take a step back, take a critical look. All right, is the metric correct? And as you mentioned, being domain specific is very, very important. These general use benchmarks, they don't really work for whatever you're optimizing for.
Yeah, and then we look at each component and do the benchmark, and you'll pick the best of breed, but your outcome metric is still suffering, right? So I think the benchmark needs to be connected to your outcome metric. Is it average hold time? Is it the number of successful drive-through things completed? And then do the whole system and hold an eval set and don't give it to anybody. Don't give it to Deepgram. Don't give it to. You should have it, and you should keep updating it. And then anytime a new vendor comes in, you run them through the paces.
Yeah, you should listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about.
But that's hard in Gen AI era, right? Because different models perform differently, partly depending on how you contextualize them. So how do you write a benchmark that actually works?
Yeah. Anyway, gonna keep things moving along. Alberto, curious in your opinion, since you've been at the intersection, or rather Twilio has been at the intersection of telecom and developer APIs, and you've been abstracting so much complexity away. Developers don't really appreciate enough how much is done for them. What would you say is the hardest thing about operating in this mode of just abstracting complexity away and shipping APIs to just work for people?
I think, and I love the challenge. We love this challenge. Things are moving extremely fast. So this imposes a challenge when we think about enterprise systems. because enterprise systems, we do have to honor compliance, and we want to, whether it is telecom compliance or whether it is industry compliance. So think of HIPAA for healthcare, for example, or PCI for payments. And one of the key challenges is how we keep up to date, and not only up to date, but at the forefront of innovation, providing our developers capabilities to continue innovating and still maintaining regulatory and industry compliance. That's where partners like Deepgram, Daily, Google, Vapi comes in which we basically divide the work, or split the challenge into the chunks that we can all contribute to make it happen. The other this is if you think about general Gen AI models and how fast they are evolving, how you build predictability. You were talking about benchmarks. Benchmarking GPT-4o versus GPT-5, and how do you make sure that not only you stay consistent or enhance the experience, but also you stay compliant. That's still a big challenge, and that's part of the complexity we're also abstracting from you,
right.
Folks, making sure that we allow you to innovate very consciously in compliance with your industry requirements and government regulation.
Yeah, I can see this being challenging, especially considering how fast this industry is moving. Every day something new is happening. As long as you're having fun while doing it.
Oh, we are.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question, like a very selfish question, though?
Sure.
Yep. If y'all could wave a magic wand for the kind of the generative model providers, so the ones who are providing the text-to-speech APIs or kind of the speech-to-text, LLM text-to-speech component systems, what would be, because I'm sure there are many things that you would want to see, like maybe one each, what would be the things that would be the nicest, like, Christmas wish list item to have?
Oh,
and you can say anything.
I'm gonna put Anoop in trouble. Word error rate equal to 0 at sub 500 milliseconds.
Gotcha.
Beautiful.
In every language, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. Because multilingual stuff is a real pain point as our ecosystem is growing. 100%.
And especially the UX for multilinguality. Like, we've just recently changed for the Gemini Live API. You can specify in the system prompt what language the model should respond in, or kind of if the model should respond dynamically based on what the user addresses, as opposed to selecting a specific language at the beginning, and that's, we're hearing mixed feedback about that too.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say, Anoop?
Yeah, I'll say this, right, and this is for text-to-text or large language. The way I think about large language models is it does three things together that didn't happen in the history before. Natural language understanding, so it understands your intent. Query construction, because it understands your intent and then tries to figure out how to query, and then it retrieves, right, information from the system. To me, continue to improve the understanding and intent, continue to build the best queries, but I think retrieval is where it starts becoming very bespoke and dispersed. So to me, like, having a much stronger, I don't know if it's only tool calling, if it's what, but like the retrieval system needs to be extremely fast and easy to build reliably. And that's where I feel that, especially in real time, where you don't have a chance to do it again and again, and you don't really want to do model racing where you're sending it to 3 different systems, and actually we already melting GPUs and now we are doing 3 times GPU melting to get what are we doing, right? So that's
We're
where
inflating NVIDIA's stock price.
That's right.
We all are, right? And
But inflating is the wrong word, right? Because there's so much utility.
well, there is, but imagine if we solved it, hopefully we'll have enough GPUs for at least the next 2 years of our work, right? So like providing a stronger retrieval system, and I don't know what the solution is, but to me that's an interesting problem. If that could be solved, we will all have significantly faster adoption and less GPU melting.
Interesting. do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Paige knows my answer to this because I've talked a lot to the DeepMind team about this, trying to come up with sort of common vocabulary and common understanding. But I actually think it's super useful to talk about this as a community. My very strongly held belief is that writing voice agents is a code-shaped problem, not an API-shaped problem. I actually think a lot of Vapi's success, I've known Nikhil and Jordan since before there was a Vapi, and I think a lot of Vapi's success is approaching it from the beginning as a code-shaped problem, not an API-shaped problem. The model providers have to write APIs because that's the way you give us access to the amazing things that the weights can do. I would like those model providers to view the API's job as to be the best possible partner for the orchestration layer, for the code layer, and historically that is not the way the APIs have been designed. The APIs have been designed as a kind of, from the view of the people who train the models. I totally understand why. But those of us who spend a lot of time in the trenches with customers and have built a bunch of software on top of the APIs have feedback about how those APIs should be designed to solve the orchestration layer problems more cleanly. And that's my magic wand, is like, think about the APIs, think about the consumer of the API as the orchestration layer code.
Beautiful. We're out of time, so I'll be wrapping things up here at this point. Once again, thank you so much, esteemed speakers, for joining us. Paige, Alberto, Anoop, Quinn. It has been a great pleasure to take a deep dive and maybe even touch on the philosophical problems in voice AI. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us.
Dan, thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.